For Americans over 55 who remember the political battles of recent decades, this meeting felt like something out of an alternate reality. Trump, with his golden hair still perfectly in place thanks to meticulous styling, and Jasmine, with her steady gaze and a voice that could cut through silence like a knife. These two seemed to embody the unrelenting divide in American politics. But there was something in the air beyond just another confrontation. Rumors about this dinner had already leaked to the press, and the headline screamed, "Trump and Crockett, truce or trap?" Jasmine stepped into the dining room, her heels clicking against the marble floor. She wore a simple yet elegant black dress that contrasted with the gilded candelabras and crystal chandeliers hanging above. Her face betrayed no emotion, but her eyes burned with determination. She knew this wasn't just a dinner, it was a battlefield, and she had no intention of retreating. "So Jasmine," Donald began, leaning back in his chair, embroidered with a monogram T. His voice was low, carrying that familiar hint of sarcasm millions of Americans had come to recognize from his television days. Carrying that familiar hint of sarcasm millions of Americans had come to recognize from his television days. "Do you really think I'm the enemy of America? Or is that just another one of your stunts for the cameras?" Jasmine set her purse on the chair beside her and sat across from him, folding her hands on the table. Her nails, painted a deep red, caught the candlelight. "I'm not here for stunts, Donald," she replied calmly, though there was steel in her voice. "I said what I believe on MSNBC. Call it what you want, but I see how your actions affect people, my constituents in Dallas, the ones losing their jobs because of your so-called efficient DOGE policies. I'm here to understand why you think that's acceptable." Donald smiled, but it wasn't a warm smile. It was the kind that hinted at the game he was playing in his mind. He waved a hand, and a butler in a crisp white uniform placed plates before them, juicy steak, rosemary-infused potatoes, and asparagus that smelled as if it had just been plucked from a garden. From the kitchen came the quiet clatter of dishes, and somewhere in the distance, the hum of the air conditioning maintained the cool atmosphere of this luxurious fortress. "You know, Jasmine," he said, slicing into his steak with surgical precision, "I didn't invite you here to argue. I invited you because you're smart. Sharp-tongued, yes, but smart. And I think we can find common ground. America is tired of this division, isn't it? People want results, not shouting matches." Jasmine raised an eyebrow, taking a sip of water from a crystal glass. Her gaze never left him, as if she were trying to decipher where the truth ended and the performance began. "Common ground," she echoed. "Are you serious? You called me low IQ on national television, and now you expect me to believe you suddenly care about dialogue? Let's be honest, Donald. You invited me here because I've become a problem for your administration. My words are reaching people, and that bothers you." He laughed loudly, the sound bouncing off the high walls. But for a brief moment, a shadow crossed his eyes, something between irritation and perhaps respect. "I like you, Jasmine. You've got guts. But listen to me," he leaned forward, his voice lowering but growing more insistent. "I'm not your enemy. I want to make America great for everyone, even your voters in Dallas. But you keep putting obstacles in my way. Why don't we try something different? You tell me what's wrong, and I'll tell you how to fix it. No cameras, no press. Just the two of us." Jasmine set down her fork, her steak barely touched. She could feel the tension in the room thickening, mingling with the scent of seared meat and Trump's expensive cologne. Her heart pounded, but she didn't show it. She knew this could be a trap, an opportunity for him to twist her words against her. But at the same time, a thought crept into her mind. What if he was actually willing to listen? What if she could make him see what she saw every day? Unemployment, fear of losing health care, the anger of people who felt abandoned. "Fine," she said finally, her voice steady but firm. "But I'm not playing your games. If we talk for real. I'll tell you about the people you don't see from this palace. About Mary, who lost her job because of your federal agency cuts. About Juan, who fears deportation even though he's been paying taxes for 20 years. Are you ready to hear that? Donald leaned back, his expression growing more serious. He nodded, but there was doubt flickering in his eyes. Go ahead, he said, but don't expect me to rush out and change everything. I have a plan and it works. Jasmine took a deep breath. She knew this was just the beginning, the start of a conversation that could either destroy everything or become the first step toward something greater. Outside, the sun was setting, painting the sky in crimson hues, while inside Mar-a-Lago, two political adversaries began a dialogue no one had seen coming. The candlelight in the Mar-a-Lago dining room flickered, casting long shadows on the walls adorned with portraits in gilded frames. Donald Trump sat with a knife and fork in hand, but his steak remained nearly untouched, a sign that he was more focused on the conversation than the meal. Jasmine Crockett, on the other hand, had pushed her plate aside, as if the food were merely decoration for this battle of words. Outside, the ocean roared louder, waves crashing against the shore, adding a natural drama to the unfolding scene inside. Mary won. You always bring up names, Donald said, his voice low with a slight edge of irritation. He tapped his finger on the table, as if keeping rhythm with his thoughts. These are all stories for the press, Jasmine. I hear them every day. But America isn't a handful of people. It's millions. And I do what works for the majority. Have you ever thought about that? Jasmine pressed her lips together, her eyes narrowing. She felt anger rising in her throat, but held it back, remembering why she was here. Her voice remained calm, but it carried the weight of years lived in battles, fought for those she represented. For the majority, she repeated, leaning in slightly. Donald, you live in a world where the majority is the people cheering for you at rallies. But I see a different America. Mary isn't just a name. She's 58, worked in the Postal Service for 30 years, and now she's out on the streets because of your optimizations. Juan isn't just a story. He's 62, spent his life building roads in Texas, and now he fears his family will be torn apart by your immigration orders. You can ignore them. I can't. Donald leaned his head back and exhaled, as if holding himself back from a sharp response. He tossed his knife onto his plate with a soft clang, making the butler near the door flinch. Outside, a seagull flew past the window, its cry cutting through the heavy silence between them. You think I don't understand struggle, he said, his voice rising slightly but still controlled. I grew up in Queens, Jasmine. My father took me to construction sites, showed me how hard people worked. I'm not some elite kid with a silver spoon. But I learned one thing. If you want to change things, you have to make big decisions. Sometimes people lose. That's business. That's life. Jasmine smiled, but it was a cold, almost bitter smile. She leaned back in her chair, crossing her arms. Big decisions, huh? Her tone sharpened. Big for who, Donald? For you? For your friends at the golf clubs? Because for Mary, this isn't just losing in business. It's losing her home because she can't pay her mortgage. For Juan, this isn't just life. It's the fear that his grandkids will never know their grandfather. You call these side effects, but for them, it's their whole world. Donald clenched his jaw, his face reddening, not from shame, but from growing anger. He hated being cornered, especially by someone he saw as beneath him in the political game. But Jasmine didn't back down. She saw his fingers tighten around the edge of the table and knew she had struck a nerve. Are you saying I'm to blame for everything? He barked, his voice now echoing off the walls. That I sit here laughing while people suffer? You have no idea what I do every day to keep this country afloat. You think it's easy making decisions when half the world wants to take you down. Jasmine didn't flinch. She held his gaze, her eyes burning with quiet, unwavering strength. I'm not saying it's easy, she replied. But I am saying you're not listening. You surround yourself with people who tell you what you want to hear. I'm here to tell you what you ignore. And if you really want to make America great, start by understanding how your decisions are breaking the lives of everyday people. The silence that followed was heavy as lead. The butler cleared his throat quietly, but no one paid him any mind. Donald looked away, his gaze drifting somewhere into the gilded corners of the room, as if searching for an answer. Jasmine could hear her own heartbeat pounding in her chest, but she showed no weakness. She knew this moment could change everything, or destroy any chance of understanding. Suddenly, the dining room doors creaked open. Melania Trump stepped in, her high heels clicking against the marble floor. Her face was calm, but her eyes betrayed concern. She stopped, taking in the scene, the tense figures at the table, the half-eaten food, the suffocating silence. "Donald," she said softly, her accent cutting through the air. "You have a call. It's urgent. Something about Doge." Donald frowned, his eyes flicking from Jasmine to Melania. "Now," he muttered. "It can't wait." "No," Melania's tone was firm. "They say it's a crisis." He stood abruptly, pushing back his chair with a screech against the floor. But before leaving, he turned back to Jasmine. "We're not done," he said, his voice low and threatening. "You want to talk about people? Fine. But I'll show you I'm more than just words. I'll be back in 5 minutes." He walked out, leaving Jasmine alone with Melania in the dining room. She felt some of the tension in her shoulders ease, but she knew this was only a pause. She looked at Melania, who stood near the door, her hands clasped in front of her. "He's not used to being challenged like that," Melania said, her voice gentle but laced with warning. "Be careful, Jasmine. He listens, but only to a point." Jasmine nodded, but her thoughts were already racing. What crisis with Doge? Was it just an excuse to escape the conversation? And what would happen when he returned? Somewhere in the house, a phone line buzzed. Donald's voice echoed through the walls, sharp, commanding. Jasmine's fingers gripped the edge of the tablecloth. She knew this dinner was far from over, and what was unfolding within these walls could change more than just their conversation. Jasmine Crockett remained at the table, her fingers still gripping the edge of the white linen tablecloth. Despite its luxury, the Mar-a-Lago dining room now felt stifling, the scent of rosemary from the cold potatoes mixed with the faint aroma of wax from the dwindling candles. Melania stood by the door, her silhouette in the chandelier's glow resembling a statue, but her eyes were locked on Jasmine. The silence was only broken by the muffled voice of Donald Trump echoing from the hallway, sharp, clipped, full of impatience. "What do you mean stopped?" His voice cut through the walls like thunder. "I said it had to be done by the end of the week. Find Musk if you have to, and fix it." Jasmine leaned forward, straining to listen. Doge, the Department of Government Efficiency, was one of Trump's most controversial projects after his return to power. By slashing federal spending, he promised to drain the swamp, but for many, it meant job losses, cuts to social programs, and chaos in public institutions. Could this crisis be connected to what she had said about Mary and Juan? Her mind buzzed with speculation, but she knew one thing. If Donald returned furious, the conversation would only get tougher. Melania stepped toward the table, her heels clicking softly against the marble. She stopped beside Jasmine, her face unreadable, but a hint of fatigue slipped into her voice. "He doesn't like it when plans go off track," she said, her accent softening the words more than they truly were. "Doge is his child. If something fails, he'll blame everyone but himself." Jasmine looked up, her eyebrows slightly raised. "And you just accept that?" she asked, unable to hide the challenge in her tone. "You see how it ruins lives, and you just stand by?" Melania sighed, her shoulders barely lowering. She glanced toward the window, where darkness had already swallowed the crimson sunset, leaving only the shimmer of waves in the moonlight. "I see more than you think," she replied quietly. But I'm not here to argue with you, Jasmine. I'm here to warn you. When he comes back, be ready. He'll either try to convince you or destroy you. Before Jasmine could respond, the doors burst open. Donald stormed into the room, his face flushed, his tie slightly loosened, signs of his growing irritation. He tossed his phone onto the table with a thud that made the glasses tremble and fixed his glare on Jasmine. "Are you happy now?" he barked, his voice laced with sarcasm and anger. "Your little speech about Mary and Juan must have reached someone. I was just told that postal unions staged a protest in Dallas. They say it's because of the cuts. And you know what? They're mentioning your name, Jasmine. Yours." Jasmine felt her heart skip a beat, but she didn't look away. She knew about the unions. Her constituents in Dallas had been preparing something like this for a while, but she hadn't expected it to explode now. Could her words really have traveled that far in just a few hours? Or was it just coincidence? She forced herself to stay calm, though a storm raged inside her. "If they're protesting, it's not because of me," she said, her voice steady but firm. "It's because of you, Donald. Because of your decisions. I'm just saying what they feel. Did you think people would quietly swallow your big plans?" Donald slammed his fist against the table, making the plates jump. Melania flinched but remained still, her face unreadable. "You think I don't know what protests are?" he shouted. "I saw them in 2020, in 2016, everywhere. But this isn't just a protest, Jasmine. They're blocking warehouses in Dallas. The mail isn't moving. And if this hits the news, and it will, trust me, they'll say you incited it." Jasmine rose from her chair, standing tall and unwavering. She wasn't physically imposing, but in that moment, it seemed as if she filled the entire room with her presence. "If they're saying my name, then I'm proud of it," she said, her voice rising but never breaking. "Because it means someone is finally listening. But don't blame me for what you created. You cut their jobs. You left them without a livelihood. What did you expect? That they'd thank you?" Donald stepped closer, his eyes narrowing, his voice dropping to a low, threatening growl. "You're playing a dangerous game, Jasmine," he said. "You think you can walk in here, throw these stories in my face, and come out a hero? I could destroy you with one phone call, one post on Truth Social, and your voters will think you sold out to me for this stake." Jasmine didn't flinch. She could feel the heat of his anger, but her own resolve burned brighter. "Try it," she said, her voice as cold as steel. "But you know the truth always comes out. And if you think I'm afraid of your threats, then you don't know me at all." Melania took a step forward, her hand subtly lifting as if she was about to intervene, but she hesitated. Outside, the wind howled, and somewhere in the house, another phone rang, a sharp, piercing sound that only heightened the tension. Donald took a step back, his chest rising and falling heavily, but he never broke eye contact with Jasmine. "You want a war?" he asked, his voice hoarse. "Because that's what this looks like." "I want justice," she replied. "And if that takes a war, then I'm ready. But I'm offering you something else. Listen to me. Don't just sit here and yell, listen. Because if you don't, Dallas is just the beginning." Donald froze, his gaze shifting between Jasmine and the phone on the table, still vibrating with incoming messages. Suddenly he grabbed it, glanced at the screen, and frowned. Whatever he saw made him hesitate. "Dallas isn't the only problem," he said, his voice suddenly lower, tense. "I just got a message. Unions in Ohio have joined in. And something's brewing in Pennsylvania. This isn't just your little protest, Jasmine. This could be a chain reaction." Jasmine felt her stomach tighten. She knew unions were strong, but she hadn't expected things to escalate this fast. Had her words really ignited this fire? Or was it just coincidence that Donald would use against her? She watched his fingers tighten around the phone, his eyes flashing with a mix of anger and fear. "So what will you do?" she asked, her voice calm but commanding. "Blame me? Or, for once, consider why people are this angry?" Donald didn't answer right away. He tossed the phone back onto the table and turned toward the window, staring out at the dark ocean. His silence was louder than any words, and Jasmine knew his next move would decide everything. The Mar-a-Lago dining room looked like a battlefield after a fight. Plates with cold food, an overturned glass leaving a puddle of water on the tablecloth, and the flickering shadows of dying candles dancing on the walls. Donald Trump stood by the window, his silhouette sharply outlined against the dark ocean rumbling beyond the glass. Jasmine Crockett remained in her seat, her hands resting on the table, but her eyes were locked onto him. Melania quietly retreated toward the door, her presence almost imperceptible, yet she still watched, as if knowing this moment would be a turning point. Donald's phone rang again, the sharp sound piercing the silence, but he didn't move to answer it. His shoulders were tense, and his fingers gripped the windowsill so tightly that his knuckles turned white. Jasmine could hear her own breath deepen, but she waited. She knew that everything now depended on what he would say or do. "You think I don't see what's happening?" Donald finally spoke, his voice hoarse but no longer filled with anger. He turned to her, his eyes gleaming in the dim light. "You think I'm blind to this? The protests, the unions, people shouting in the streets. I see it, Jasmine. But I can't just stop everything and run to save each person individually. That's not how this works." Jasmine lifted her chin, her gaze steady, but there was a new note in her voice, not anger, but sincerity. "No one's asking you to save each person," she said. "But you can start listening. Not to your advisors, not to the crowds at rallies, but to the people losing everything because of your big plans. You can take a step back and ask, what if I'm wrong? You're not a god, Donald. You're a man." He frowned, his lips pressing into a thin line. Jasmine saw pride battling with something else, perhaps doubt. Outside, the wind picked up, palm branches swayed, casting moving shadows on the walls, mirroring the chaos brewing in the country. The phone rang again, but Donald silenced it with a sharp motion, tossing it onto the table. "You want me to admit I was wrong?" he asked, his voice quieter but still taut. "You want me to go on TV and say, 'Jasmine Crockett is right, I screwed everything up'? Is that what you want?" "No," she replied, her voice calm but firm. "I don't need your apology. I need you to act. Stop the cuts to the Postal Service, just for a month. Give people a chance to breathe. Talk to the unions instead of sending the police after them. Show that you can be more than just your ego." Donald let out a short, sharp laugh, without malice. He ran a hand down his face, as if wiping away exhaustion, then looked at her with a new expression, not anger, but something resembling respect. "You won't give up, will you?" he said, his tone almost surprised. "You could just walk out of here, tear me apart in the press, put on a show. But you're sitting here, fighting me like an equal." "Because I believe that even you can change," Jasmine answered. "Not for me, not for fame, but for the people standing in the streets of Dallas, Ohio, Pennsylvania. One move from you can stop this or make it worse." He was silent for a long time, so long that Jasmine began to think she had lost. But then he turned back to the table, sat across from her, and picked up his phone. His fingers hovered over the screen. Then he dialed a number. "Hey, Stephen," he said when someone answered. His voice was firm but calm. "Tell them to pause the Postal Service cuts. Yeah, I'm serious. For a month. And get in touch with the unions. I want to meet with them tomorrow. No police, you hear me? We'll talk." Jasmine felt her chest tighten with surprise. She held her breath, waiting. Was this a joke? Another game? But when Donald put down the phone and looked at her, there was no deception in his eyes. "You've got your month," he said. "But that doesn't mean I'm giving in. I'm just seeing what happens. If this doesn't work, I'll reverse everything. And don't expect me to go soft, Jasmine. I'm still me." She nodded, her lips curving into a faint smile, not triumphant, but hopeful. "I'm not asking you to change who you are," she said. I'm asking you to be better than you were yesterday. And that's enough. For now. Donald smirked, but there was a spark in his eyes, not of anger, but of challenge. He picked up a glass of water that had remained untouched and held it toward her. To your nerves of steel, he said, and to us not killing each other by the end of this month. Jasmine took her own glass and clinked it lightly against his. The water was cold, refreshing, and for the first time all evening, she felt the tension in her shoulders ease. Outside, the wind calmed, the ocean settled, and silence filled the dining room, not tense, but full of possibility. Melania, still standing by the door, smiled softly, barely noticeable, but sincere. She left the room, leaving the two of them alone, and Jasmine knew this wasn't the end. It was only the beginning. 1 month. 1 chance. And if it worked, maybe America would get something more than just a truce. Donald leaned back in his chair, his gaze thoughtful. You know, he said, this could make an interesting story. If we don't screw it up. Jasmine smiled wider. Then let's not screw it up, she replied.